Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 Patch 8 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering my favorite new support character in the game. This character provides excellent healing and damage mitigation, incredible disruption to your enemy's plans and great control, and can morph into an excellent late game controller and damage dealer if the situation calls for it. It's also excellent for co-op runs. If you are playing Patch 8 with a bunch of relatively new players who are getting back into the game, and you want them to feel like the all-stars in your party, like they're doing everything and slaughtering everything all on their own, but secretly know that you're the one doing all the work, this character is absolutely perfect for you. I'm using Shadowheart as the example character here, because this is a support build, and she often ends up filling that role in a party, but I think that it actually makes a perfect build for your main character or a custom character to lead your party. This build gets excellent access to dialogue skills and is a charisma-based build, and great skill access in general, so if that's important to you in a main character, you'll be able to succeed on whatever dialogue checks you want, and help your party with variety of skill access. We also, in combat, spend most of our time inspiring our allies to greater feats of heroism through support and inspiration, and unlike a lot of other support-focused builds, can lead from the front, so this makes perfect sense to me as the charismatic leader that can bring together such a diverse and in many ways difficult group of people as the Baldur's Gate 3 companions. If you are building this as a custom character, what race you pick for this build almost entirely doesn't matter because it's so self-sufficient. From a mechanical standpoint, the best option, as it almost always is Duergar, because the out-of-combat invisibility allows you to lock down enemies and win fights before they start, because you can approach without them ever knowing that you're there. And normally for a concentration-based build, I would highly recommend Halfling, but this build already can't roll ones on its concentration saves. So while Halfling's ability to reroll ones is still excellent, still an amazing ability, it's less impactful for this build than for many other caster builds. Great options include Halfling nonetheless, Gnome for the advantage on mental saving throws, or Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf for the bonus movement speed. Another fun option is Zariel Tiefling, because the Thaumaturgy cantrip is actually very useful for improving your dialogue skills. But what race you pick with this build will be mostly completely up to you, because the build doesn't need anything in particular from the racial bonuses. Although this is primarily a Bard build, we're actually not going to be starting with Bard, we're going to be starting with a level of Druid. Stars Druid empowers this build immensely, giving us tons of extra healing and the ability to maintain concentration easily on all of our spells, even if we're taking damage. And since we're going to be taking Druid levels, we want to take it first so that we can take Bard second, and make sure that our casting ability for items, and illithid powers and scrolls is charisma rather than wisdom. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a weird glitch in Baldur's Gate 3 based on the level order that you take as you're leveling up. Just follow the order given in this guide and you'll be just fine. With our first Druid level, we get medium armor and shield proficiency, which is very, very useful to a Bard. Bards normally only get light armor, so getting medium armor and shields gives you a huge amount of additional survivability. Medium armor is the best armor type in Baldur's Gate 3. It has the most possible options and amazing options for increasing your armor class, which makes this character vastly more resilient than a Bard normally would be because of this Druid level. We also get a bunch of other great options at level 1, the most mostly we're looking for the level 2 Star Druid abilities to power up the build with our Druid levels. For our cantrip selection, we are going to be using our charisma rather than our wisdom as our casting stat for this build, so we don't want to take any cantrips that rely on us having high wisdom. Star Druid also gets guidance for free at level 2 when we enter Star Druid, so we don't need to take guidance at level 1. Now you can take this and then respec guidance, take guidance and then respec once you actually level up into Star Druid to get rid of guidance and take another cantrip, but just for simplicity's sake, we're going to be taking resistance and produce flame. Produce flame not because we're going to use it as an actual attack, but because it sheds a light source, so it's still a pretty useful utility spell, and resistance because it's the best utility spell that we can get from Druid. Our Druid cantrips aren't that important. Obviously the best one of these is guidance, but we're going to get that one for free anyways. For our ability selection here, we are going to not take high wisdom because we are really a bard and not a druid, this first druid level notwithstanding, but instead take 16 in charisma, 12 wisdom, pushing the buttons wrong here, 14 in constitution, and 16 in dexterity. This character is going to want to have high initiative because we are very, very good at locking down enemies, so the 16 in dexterity is very useful for winning initiative. We also don't need super high constitution because the Stars Druid dragon form is going to let us maintain concentration on our spells, even if we end up taking damage. For our skill selection here, the only really important skill to grab is Perception, because druids get access to it, and pretty much every character that gets access to Perception wants to have it. I also highly recommend taking a background that gives you either Sleight of Hand or Persuasion, and maybe a couple other dialogue skills, whichever ones you really care about, because that will allow you to take the other one of those two with your Bard skill level up, which we'll get next level, and make sure that you have all of the utility spells that your party needs. Between Persuasion and Sleight of Hand, you can do all of the out-of-combat skill checks that you need, dialogue and lockpicking, and so you can cover all of that for your party, and so a background like Urchin that gives you Stealth and Sleight of Hand, or Guild Artisan that gives you Persuasion and Insight, will go a very long way for this character. You can also, of course, take Medicine, because that comes up in dialogue sometimes. Druids get access to it, so you can pick that up. Religion as well. Any of the knowledge skills are great to have, but mostly you want either Persuasion or Sleight of Hand from your background. Alright, that's all the decisions that we have to make at level 1, but let's talk about spell preparation briefly, and then move on to level 2. As you can see here, with 12 wisdom, we get 2 prepared druid spells, and which ones we take actually matter quite a bit, because any spells that we can prepare from druid are spells we don't have to learn from our bard levels. Spells that you have to learn are a much more important resource than spells you have to prepare, because your prepared spells you can swap if you need a different one. So we need to make sure that we are taking a look at our options for our druid spells so that we know what bard spells we don't have to level up. In this case, I'm going to recommend taking Enhanced Leap and Longstrider as our 2 druid spells. Longstrider is very important for any party to have and is a ritual spell, so you can cast it outside of combat without spending a spell slot, same as Enhanced Leap, also a ritual. And Longstrider lasts all day and just makes your whole party vastly more effective. Enhanced Leap gives you a ton of extra mobility in combat. Although this is going to be a healing-focused character, we don't want to take these healing spells because as a druid, the druid versions of these spells will use our wisdom, whereas the bard versions of these spells will use our charisma, so we would much rather take the healing spells with our bard levels. That's it for level 1, let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we are immediately going to leave Druid and start taking levels in Bard. Of course, a Druid with 12 Wisdom is not a very effective combatant early. Your Dexterity is plenty to get you off of the Nautiloid, but we want to take Bard levels so that we have some more powerful combat options in the early game as quickly as we possibly can. As a Bard, we're going to get 2 more cantrips, and the cantrips that I recommend taking here are going to be Friends and Minor Illusion. You can take Vicious Mockery as well if you want to have a charisma-based combat option, but honestly just a short bow or any kind of bow with your 16 dexterity will be just as, if not more, effective than Vicious Mockery, and just as spammable, so you'd rather just use a bow and save your cantrip slots for things with a little more utility. Friends, of course, is going to be very, very good for all kinds of dialogue checks throughout the game, and Minor Illusion is incredible for its out-of-combat utility, letting you group enemies for AoE or split them apart from their allies to pick them off one by one. For our spell selection here, we're going to take our healing spells, and we want both Healing Word and Cure Wounds. Because of how Stars Druid works, we actually occasionally will want to use Cure Wounds as an action to trigger the Chalice healing with an action, because maybe we have a more important bonus action, and all we need to do is spend a spell slot in order to trigger Chalice healing, so Cure Wounds is actually very useful to have on this bard as well. We're going to take Dissonant Whispers as our main combat spell. It does great damage, locks down melee enemies, and is just an excellent spell overall. And finally, I recommend picking up Heroism. There's a lot of other options that you can take at this level. You can grab Tasha's Hideous Laughter for more control. You can take a utility spell like Disguise Self or Speak with Animals, though if you need Speak with Animals, you can always prepare it as a druid instead. Sleep is a great option early, but Heroism gives you a couple gives you something nice to concentrate on in the early game, and the constant healing is actually very relevant. I used to not value this spell very highly, but over time I've become more impressed with it because the 5 temp HP every turn actually adds up a lot in these early game fights, so it can be pretty useful to have. Of course, as a bard, we need to make absolutely certain that we pick the right starting instrument, or you completely ruin your entire playthrough. And then for our additional skill, we're just going to take whichever of sleight of hand or persuasion we didn't pick up with our background. Now, if you got neither of them with your background, definitely take persuasion. It's the more important of the two. But ideally, you would pick up both of these if you're doing this with a custom background. Persuasion is by far the more useful, though, and this character is excellent at it, so that's the one that we really need to prioritize grabbing. That's it for level 2. Let's go to level 3. At character level 3, we have a pretty interesting choice. We can either take our second bard level right away to prioritize getting our bardic abilities online as early as possible, or we can take our second druid level right away to get Stars Druid abilities immediately. I'm going to recommend taking the bard level over the druid level, though I think that you could do either depending on what you want to prioritize in this build. But in general, I think that getting our second level bard spells online as soon as possible for things like Cloud of Daggers and Hold Person gives us such a huge boost to our combat power that we really want to prioritize that. It also lets us get our Glamour Bard abilities online as quickly as possible. So we're going to take the bard level here, which gives us Song of Rest, letting our character operate even longer in a given day and giving the whole party a big boost to their effectiveness and their ability to spend resources. And we also get another spell, and the spell that I'm going to recommend taking here is Tasha's Hideous Laughter. This is a great lockdown spell, very, very useful throughout the entire game, so having access to this makes us even better at locking down enemies. It's also extremely funny. We don't actually have any other decisions to make at level 2. Our spell selection is perfect, so we don't need to replace a spell, so we can move immediately on to character level 4. At level 4, we're going to take our third level of Bard, and here we get to take our subclass. The subclass that we're going to take is the College of Glamour. Now, Glamour Bard gives us a bunch of really great abilities, which I'll talk about in a second. But first, of course, we also get to pick up expertise in 2 skills. I'm going to recommend taking Persuasion and Perception, or Sleight of Hand, if you have access to Sleight of Hand from your background, because this is going to make you excellent at fulfilling pretty much every out-of-combat need that your party has. With expertise in Persuasion and maxing your Charisma, you're going to succeed on every important dialogue check in the game, and with expertise in Sleight of Hand, you can now unlock every chest, or with expertise in Perception, you can ensure that you will always find traps before they find you. For our spell selection here, we're going to be taking Cloud of Daggers, which is just the best overall combat spell in the game at second spell level. This will enable us to win a lot of these early game fights much more cleanly with AoE damage, so we can provide some damage to our allies. If you really want to play this as a pure support and control character, you can grab Hold Person. You don't have to do any damage with this character if you don't want to, so if you're going for a pacifist run or something, then you can pick up Hold Person and get rid of Dissonant Whispers as well, and this character will still be quite effective if you want to play a pure healer, but Cloud of Daggers is the best overall combat option. From our subclass, of course, with the College of Glamour, we get the Mantle of Inspiration. Very fitting for a charismatic leader, and it gives us the ability to give 2 of our allies 5 temp HP, and this can include yourself, 5 temp HP all day for a bonus action. This lets us turn a resource, Bardic Inspiration, that we will eventually get back on a short rest as we level up in Bard, into a long rest resource in terms of these temp HP, and gives us a pretty solid amount of damage mitigation to our party. Now, at this level, it's not that exciting because we can only restore our inspiration dice on a long rest, but later on as we level up, this is going to get to be a lot of damage mitigation over the course of a day. The number of targets and amount also goes up as we level, so we're going to prevent a lot of damage. The Charm ability on Mantle of Inspiration is also really cool, because if an ally who has this ability is hit, then the enemy gets charmed, and this effect does not have a saving throw. The charm counts as coming from the creature that they just hit, and so they are then no longer able to attack that creature. That completely throws off any character, any enemy with multiple weapon attacks in a round, because they're going to attack and then get charmed and then be unable to continue to attack that ally of yours or this character itself. So they're going to have to find a new target. It stops enemies in the middle of their actions. It really disrupts actions, especially in the later game when a lot of enemies have many actions that they do in a turn, and it can prevent enemies from being able to do anything effective overall when this ability goes off. It also provides a lot of damage mitigation, given that this character has medium armor and shield proficiency, the extra temp HP go a long way because you're not getting hit that often, so it's not that often they'll be depleted. And that can let you stay alive for much longer than any other bard would in your position, because you have a ton of healing, including self-healing, and a ton of damage mitigation from Mantle of Inspiration. Something very, very funny just happened to my partner who's playing video games in the office at the adjacent wall. So if you heard someone howling with laughter in the background, then that's what just happened. I don't know what the joke was, but apparently she really enjoyed it. At this level also, we can replace a spell, and I'm going to recommend replacing Heroism. While it's a quite solid spell for the first couple levels, we now have another source of temp HP, so we don't really need the Heroism temp HP, and we can get a more powerful control spell at this level in the form of Hold Person. Hold Person's great to support your party because it makes your melee allies critically hit, and of course just locks down an enemy, which is very, very powerful. So we're going to be concentrating at this level either on Hold Person or on Cloud of Daggers in most fights. At character level 5, we again have a very interesting choice. We can take our 4th and then 5th and probably 6th bard levels at this point in order to get our more powerful bard abilities online as early as possible. That's obviously a great option. Higher level spells and more feats and more abilities is amazing. We could also take our 2nd druid level to get our Circle of the Stars abilities online much earlier. For this build, I'm going to recommend taking the Druid level. While the higher level Bard abilities are excellent, and you can certainly prioritize getting those earlier if you want, the Circle of the Stars abilities give us a huge and very relevant power boost at this point in the game that makes a lot of the build really come online, so we're going to grab that. We're going to, of course, as our subclass, take Circle of the Stars, which gives us a ton of awesome abilities. Firstly, we get Guidance as a cantrip known. This is probably the single best spell in Baldur's Gate 3, so you're never sad to learn it. If you took it with your first Druid level, you can now respec and learn something else, because you have Guidance for free. We also get these star maps, which give us free casts of Guiding Bolt a couple times per day. Now, these do use your Wisdom for the attack roll, so it seems like they're not going to be that useful. There's a lot of cases where we have advantage or even automatic hits against enemies. We have Hold Person as a bard spell known, so we can lock enemies down, and then if we're in 10 feet of within 10 feet of them, critically hit them with these guiding bolts for 8d6 of damage, which is an extremely powerful amount of burst damage at this level. So these are actually very relevant spell casts for this character. We also get the 3 starry forms, all of which are very useful for various reasons for this build. Now, Luminous Arrow is not that great for this character because it's an attack roll using our Wisdom, so we probably are not going to be using Archer that frequently. But Dragon form and Chalice form are both very, very useful. In the early game, we're mostly going to be using Chalice form. This is why we took both Cure Wounds and Healing Word as spells known, because sometimes we want to trigger Chalice form with an action and sometimes with a bonus action. How this works is we get to add a d8 of healing as a free action every time we cast a healing spell that uses at least a level 1 spell slot. So Healing Word, or I think this is actually showing the wrong stat. It should be a d8 plus our Wisdom, but it's showing a d8 plus 3. I'm actually not sure why that is the case. But regardless, a d8 plus 1 healing here is going to be still extremely useful as additional healing every time we cast a healing spell. You can do this as an action or as a bonus action and trigger the Chalice healing, and that just lets us effectively double all the healing that we do. This does trigger the buff on healing items, so Chalice will allow us to spread that Blade Ward and Bless to our allies extremely effectively, making this character one of the most efficient healers in the game. Dragon form is also extremely useful, and is probably what we're going to be using later on in the game. With Dragon form, you effectively get reliable talent, the level 10 rogue ability, for concentration saves. You can only roll a 10 or higher on your concentration. Combined with our Constitution save, that gives us a minimum result of a 12 on concentration, which means we're very rarely going to fail on low amounts of damage. Now, you can still fail on high amounts of damage, but if you have advantage and other sources of bonuses, this makes it extremely difficult for enemies to break your concentration on spells, meaning that you can maintain concentration on powerful spells like Cloud of Daggers and like Hold Person, and later, of course, on Mantle of Majesty, which we really want to maintain concentration on much more easily. Dazzling Breath is also great because it still does half damage on a saving throw, so even with low wisdom, enemies will take this additional damage very efficiently, and it's radiant damage, so it lets us spread the radiating orb items if that's something that we want to do as well. So Dazzling Breath as a bonus action gives us a great amount of AoE damage, and also can let us debuff enemies, so both of these forms are incredibly relevant. Also, don't forget Wild Shape. Even at this level, it can give you a bunch of mobility options, so it's still pretty useful. For our spell preparation at this level, I recommended taking these two before. Now we can just grab another utility spell like Create Water or Fog Cloud, which lets us blind enemies with no saving throw. So we're in great shape now that we've gotten our Chalice abilities. At character level 6, we're going back to Bard. Now that we've gotten Chalice and Dragon form from our Star Druid abilities, we want, of course, to get our powerful Bard abilities, so let's get to it. For our cantrip selection at this level, you can take Vicious Mockery. At this point, you probably won't be firing a bow that often, so this does give you a decent combat option that you can use. You can also take Blade Ward. Blade Ward is very useful, again, for maintaining concentration on spells, because having incoming damage and then only being able to roll a minimum of a 12 on your concentration saves is very, very useful for this character. So I recommend Blade Ward because it can keep concentration. It also effectively doubles the efficiency of the temp HP that you're getting from Mantle of Inspiration, because when you take half damage, those temp HP go twice as far. Not a spell that you're going to be casting that often, but very, very useful when it does come up. For our spell selection at this level, there's a lot of different options, and at this point you should have some idea of what your party actually needs, but Enhance ability can be useful for some very important skill checks later on. Crown of Madness can win some fights. Heat Metal is a very good ability to disarm enemies, but I'm probably just going to recommend Invisibility unless you're a Dwergar, because the utility of Invisibility is very high, and you have most of your combat spells already available, but at this point it's more or less dealer's choice, because you should have a good idea of what your party needs. For our feat here, we again have a couple options. One other thing that this character could do is take only 10 wisdom and 17 charisma, use Ethel's hair, and that would let us get alert. But either way, alert is always a great option on honor mode, so increasing our initiative is going to be very good, or of course we can just boost our charisma. If you have initiative gear that you can give to this character, I recommend just taking an ASI, boosting your charisma. But if you are strained on initiative gear, another party member needs it more, alert is of course a great option for this character as well. At level 7, we're taking our 5th level of Bard, and this gives us Font of Inspiration, allowing our inspiration dice to come back on a short rest. So now the amount of damage mitigation that we're doing with Glamour Bard is actually quite a bit more significant. Obviously, 10 temp HP per inspiration die is not that much when you only have a few per long rest. But when you have many, many inspiration dice, then that adds up to hundreds of hit points over the course of the day. So you can actually mitigate a lot of damage. It only takes your bonus action to reapply it when it gets knocked off, and it will often cause enemies to effectively skip half their turn when they get charmed in an inconvenient location. You also get better at actually using your inspiration dice, but mostly you're going to want to use Mantle of Inspiration. So that's the main thing that we get at Bard level 5 from our class levels, or from our character level ups. But of course, we also get to take higher level spells. There are two really important spells to have here. The first of these is Glyph of Warding, which again is a non-concentration combat spell that it's extremely versatile. You can make an ice surface with it to knock enemies prone and control them that way and also do damage, or you can put them to sleep. Glyph of Warding, just an incredible spell. Of course, it looks like it's supposed to be a trap that enemies have to walk on, but if you just cast it right on them, it goes off immediately, so it's one of the best combat spells in the game. The second one, and we're going to replace one of our lower level spells, something that we're not using as often. In this case, probably Cloud of Daggers, because the damage from this is less relevant at this point. And we're going to replace it with Hypnotic Pattern. Something that I should mention about concentration spells is that people often believe that you need to avoid having a concentration-heavy spell list, like you should avoid having lots of concentration spells on your list, and that's the wrong way to think about it. With a concentration spell, you want a spell that's going to be a 10 out of 10 in that combat, because you want your concentration spell to only be the only spell you cast in most combats that you cast it in, because it should stop you from having to spend other resources in that fight. So even though we have a lot of concentration options, the goal here is to get ones that will outright win certain fights on their own, and then that's the only spell that we have to use in that fight. So we're picking up Hypnotic Pattern, which we can concentrate on, but we also get a great non-concentration combat option here as well. At character level 8, we're taking our 6th level of Bard, and we get 2 incredibly powerful things. So firstly, at Bard level 6, it's not listed here, but our Mantle of Inspiration goes from targeting 2 enemies for 5 hit points each to targeting, or 2 allies for 5 hit points each to targeting 3 allies for 8 hit points each. Now every inspiration die we spend is 24 hit points for our party, which is a huge amount of damage mitigation, and it's only going to get better from here. We also, of course, get Mantle of Majesty. This lets us spend our bonus action and our concentration, this does require your concentration, to cast Command, and then recast Command as a bonus action once per turn for 10 turns. Against any enemy, in any fight, I can't talk, in any fight where there's a single super powerful enemy, or one enemy that's much stronger than other enemies, Mantle of Majesty basically auto-wins those fights, because you just take that one enemy out of the fight completely. Command is one of the best things that you can do to disable an enemy, just costing them their turn with no questions asked, other than do they fail the save. And if they're charmed, they automatically fail the save. Since we have Mantle of Inspiration, we have an easy way to get them charmed. Put it on an ally, have that ally trigger an attack of opportunity, enemy hits them, he gets charmed, no saving throw on that, Mantle of Majesty Command, no saving throw on that, so we just lock down any super dangerous enemy without a saving throw. Super useful in a lot of boss fights, especially near the end of Act 2. This is one of the best possible options, and that's about when we should be getting it, when we're hitting character level 8. We also are great at maintaining concentration on this. The main downside is that it's concentration and only once per long rest, so you really, really don't want to get it interrupted. But because we're a Star Druid, that more or less can't happen, so we're great at locking down enemies, and also got a ton of extra damage mitigation. For our spell at this level, we're going to be taking Plant Growth here, because this is again a non-concentration option that can just win some fights on its own, although there's a bunch of other great options that you can take as well. Fear is an excellent control spell, Enhance Ability remains a very useful utility spell, but Plant Growth just shuts down melee enemies, it doesn't take your concentration, so you can use it and Mantle of Majesty in the same fight, for example, to lock down all of the melee adds and the big boss, with just this one character. Character level 9, we're continuing to level in Bard, getting access to 4th level Bard spells. Our spell selection at this point covers a lot of ground, but we have a couple great options for our 4th level spells as well. Confusion is another fight-winning spell. This can be very useful if the battlefield is confused, because it doesn't target your allies. So if your melee allies and enemies are all sort of mixed up together on the battlefield, you can still cast Confusion and lock down a bunch of enemies. Freedom of Movement makes an excellent panic button, where if an ally gets stunned, you can immediately snap them out of it. And Greater Invisibility just wins a bunch of encounters by turning, if you have a character who has high stealth checks, you can turn them invisible and have them kill enemies before they ever know that you're there. I'm going to recommend taking Confusion because it gives us another great option depending on the situation, so we always have a relevant spell to cast, but again, at this point, you should have a better idea of what your party needs in particular. For example, Confusion is less useful if you don't have a lot of melee allies, but this is going to be the best in most circumstances. Character level 10, we're taking our 8th level of Bard, and that's going to give us another feat. And of course, for our feat, we're going to take an ability improvement to boost our charisma to maximum. This makes our Mantle of Majesty saving throw as high as possible. It makes our not a pattern saving throws as high as possible, and so on. This character, of course, has high spell save DC, has a lot of saving throw targeting effect, so we want high spell save DCs, and we want high charisma for our dialogue skills and everything. Alert, of course, also a great option, but just an ASI to boost our charisma to max is going to be the most efficient. For our spell selection here, again, at this point you should have a great idea of what your party needs, but freedom of movement is always a useful panic button, so that's what I would sort of generically pick. But fear, going back for Cloud of Daggers, or heat metal, enhanceability, any of these are great options as well. At Bard level 9, we get 5th level Bard spells, but importantly, because we have 2 Druid levels as well, and these are both full spellcasters, we actually get 6th level spell slots. So we didn't sacrifice any spell casting progression by taking the Druid levels, just spell access, but we still have the higher level spell slots. That's actually very relevant for Hold Monster, which is the spell that we're going to take, because casting it with a 6th level slot lets you lock down 2 enemies with Hold Monster. Super powerful spell, of course, works on everything that's not undead in the game. Also, by the way, because Mantle of Majesty, unlike the command spell, does work on undead. So now Hold Monster works on everything that's not undead. Mantle of Majesty can still lock down undead, so in fights with powerful undead, you still have a great option. This just gives us an excellent source of lockdown for every enemy in the game, and we even have the 6th level spell slot to upcast it and lock down 2 if we want to. But the real excitement, of course, comes at Bard level 10, because we get to upgrade our Mantle of Inspiration and get access to magical secrets. So firstly, we upgrade our Mantle of Inspiration. Now, instead of targeting 3 allies for 8 hit points each, it targets 4 allies for 11 hit points each. That means for every inspiration die we spend, we get 44 temporary hit points. A bard at this level has 5 inspiration dice and 4 short rests, because we have Song of Rest, so we get an extra short rest. So even without any buffs or anything, like the gloves that give us an extra inspiration die or extra short rest from other bards, that is 20 times 44 or 880 temporary hit points that we can give over the course of the day. That's a massive amount of damage mitigation. Nearly 1,000 bonus hit points for our party is an incredible preventative measure that keeps your allies alive, even before we get to the part where a lot of enemies will have to just stop attacking them after they hit them the first time because of the charm and all the lockdown that you provide. The sheer amount of damage mitigation that gives your party is absurd and will keep you alive for vastly longer than you otherwise would, which is what makes this my favorite new support character. We also get some additional skill expertise, so we can pick up skill expertise and a couple other things, and we get another cantrip, and of course the cantrip that we're going to take is going to be True Strike to annoy people in the YouTube comments. We get a spell known from Bard, which we can go back for any of the utility spells that we think we might need. Again, at this point, you should have a great idea of what spells you might be missing for your party, so you will have a better idea than I will what should fit here. But enhanceability is very useful for some late game events. Greater invisibility is always helpful, and fear is just still a really powerful control spell, so I would start by looking at those. The really exciting part, though, of course, comes with magical secrets. We all know how powerful this ability is, and how incredible the amount of options that it gives you is for a character. There are, I would say, at least, 8 amazing spells that we could pick here, any one of which I would be very, very happy with. Now, of course, every party wants counterspell, so that's always the first thing that you should consider when you're taking magical secrets. We're a full spellcaster, we have up to 6 level spell slots. Counterspell is a great defensive ability, giving us an awesome amount of defense and helping keep our party alive. Counterspell is one of the best options in the game because it turns your reaction into canceling an enemy's entire turn and costs them a super valuable resource in the process. So, of course, it is a great choice for this character. We also don't have a lot of other uses for our reaction, so Counterspell is very helpful. This is a healing-focused character, so Mass Healing Word is very good for applying those buffs, also triggers Chalice Healing, and Warden of Vitality can give us a ton of extra healing, though it is worth noting that this recasting Warden of Vitality doesn't trigger Chalice healing, which is unfortunate, but you won't get the extra D8 if you're using Warden of Vitality. It's still a very good option for healing builds, though. Some other amazing options include Spirit Guardians, because this character with Dragon form does a bunch of radiant damage. We have the Guiding Bolts from Stars Druid for a bunch of radiant damage, and Spirit Guardians we can suddenly turn into a great Radiating Orb build. Just running around with Spirit Guardians, enemies that hit us are hitting only our temporary hit points, and then they get charmed, so they won't be able to hit again. We're preventing them from hitting us with the Radiating Orbs, and if they do actually hit us, they don't get to try a second time. We also can maintain concentration on Spirit Guardians very easily, have 6 level spell slots, so we can Mantle of Majesty one fight and Spirit Guardians in a different fight, and just wipe the floor with enemies that way. So another awesome option there. Hunger of Hadar, always a great control spell, so always worth looking at. And of course, Conjure Elemental will let us spend our 6th level spell slot on a Myrmidon, so that gives us yet another dimension in which we can buff our party by providing such a powerful summon. Honestly, any combination of those spells is going to be excellent, and so what you pick is a little more up to what you want to emphasize for your character. I think that generically the strongest option is Counterspell and Conjure Elemental, but probably the most fun option is Counterspell and Spirit Guardians, because it gives you the whole Radiating Orb build that you can kind of backdoor into at the last moment, and it works very well with what that character's doing also. So I would suggest either Counterspell and Conjure Elemental, or Spirit Guardians or Hunger of Hadar as the second one. Those are probably the strongest options overall, but Spirit Guardians work so well with the other things that this character is doing that this is what I would pick overall. Alright, my friends, that is a look at my favorite new support character in Baldur's Gate 3. I think this character is a blast to play and provides so much survivability for your party, but of course we can make it stronger with items, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, we have a lot of different options and the option to use some of the most powerful items in the game to their maximum effect. Firstly, this character is very good at healing. Being able to provide lots of healing words and cure wounds as well as chalice healing means that we definitely want to use the buff on heal item set, the Hellrider's Pride and the Whispering Promise, at least for the first 2/3 of the game. These will give our party a huge amount of buffs with Bless and Blade Ward constantly on our party members, and just increase the mitigation that we're providing. Remember that Blade Ward multiplies the effectiveness of the temp HP that we're giving them with our bardic abilities, and also multiplies the effectiveness of healing. So the Hellrider's Pride supports the strategy that also enables it, making it a very, very efficient item. The other thing that we're mainly looking for is increased defenses and improvements to our spellcast. Of course, we want boosts to our spell save DC and our initiative, so items like the Fistbreaker Helm are excellent for us. And for our shield, because of course as a druid we get shield proficiency, I recommend the Sentinel Shield for increased initiative, though Ketheric's Shield for increased spell save DC is also good. But boosts to our initiative are the one thing that this character really needs to perform super well in honor mode, because +3 is definitely too low, so you either need to take alert, use a vigilance elixir, or improve it using gear. So initiative boosts and the heal items are the most important. For our weapon, we have a lot of different options. As a spellcaster, of course, Markahesh gear is almost always the best in slot, giving you an extra cast of a 6th level spell, and also giving you 6th level Chain Lightning once per short rest, which can enable you to be an excellent damage dealer, also boosting your spell save DC as well, so it gives this character a great damage option if that's a route that you want to go. For a more defensively focused version of the character, the Devotee's Mace, which you can get by leveling a character in Cleric to level 10, summoning it, and then respecking that character, so you don't have to have a Cleric to have access to this, gives you the Healing Incense Aura, which gives you constant passive healing for 10 turns for a whole fight. This does apply the buff on heal items and just lets your character be a much better healer. Remember again that we've got damage mitigation and much better AC and everything than most other bard characters, so we're much better at being up in the mix with this aura and getting it on our melee party members than other bards would be, and we can do it much more safely. So this is a great option as well. This character also, for the same reason, makes a great Falara Louvre character. You're not going to be making weapon attacks, so the relatively low damage of your actual attacks with Falar doesn't matter with this character. And so you can just be a great carrier for this. You can either use Sing or Shriek to buff your party or debuff enemies, and you're great with both of those options. Obviously, Falar is amazing, and most honor mode parties should find a way to use this item because it's so broken, and this character is going to be really good at using it. For our armor, one thing that we have to decide at this point is, are we transitioning in the late game into a Spirit Guardians character? If we are, of course, we want the Luminous armor. We're great at dealing radiant damage, so this character can provide tons and tons of radiating orbs. And so if we're taking Spirit Guardians with our level 10 magical secrets, or our level 12 magical secrets in this case, then we want the radiating orb item set. Luminous armor, boots of stormy clamor, gloves of belligerent skies, coruscation ring, and callous glow ring together give us the ability to radiating orb enemies very, very effectively because of the amount of radiant damage that we're outputting. And that will just constantly cause enemies to miss all of their attacks. Again, increasing our armor class or decreasing the attack rolls of enemies increases the effectiveness of all the damage mitigation that we're outputting. If enemies only hit half the time and only do half damage because we're blade warding our allies as well, then they effectively do only a quarter of the damage that they would normally do, which makes the 44 hit points that we're giving out with Mantle of Inspiration effectively 176 hit points, because enemies do only a quarter of the damage that they would be doing normally. So the more mitigation we have and the more ways we have to protect those hit points, the better they all get. They all multiply together in terms of the effective hit points of your party. So very, very efficient to reduce enemy attack rolls for this character. If we're not doing that, then we have a couple other great options. The Armor of Agility gives us the highest AC for a medium armor, or the Flame Enameled Armor is an awesome medium armor set that not every party has a use for, but is such a powerful item that finding a use for this armor is very helpful. Bonus to initiative is something that we very much want, and the bonuses to saving throws works on our concentration saves, so in combination with our dragon form, that will help us keep our concentration on our spells by always passing saves. And of course, resistance to fire is also very useful for taking half damage. Mitigation, very good for all the reasons I just talked about. It also effectively gives you cold resistance, because you can use Fire Shield Warm when an enemy has cold damage, and then you have cold resistance as well as fire resistance. So Flame Enameled Armor is very, very good for this character. But mostly what you're looking for is initiative, spell save DC, and defensive capabilities, in addition to the particular item sets that buff your healing and radiating orbs. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at this awesome new support character using Patch 8 subclasses, and I hope you have fun when Patch 8 launches pretty soon and can take this character for a spin. As always, of course, if you have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides. With the upcoming launch of Patch 8, I will be diving back into Baldur's Gate 3 with reckless abandon, so I know there's been a fewer build guides than many of you might want, but with the new content, we're really going to be getting into it, so look forward to that. And of course, thanks for watching, my friends. I'll catch you next time.